A handkerchief drenched in tears lay fallenly on the armrest of the sofa, its fabric thoroughly soaked. Yet Annabel paid it no mind. Her heart ached, and she felt deeply wronged. The tears flowed freely, no longer driven by hysteria or an emotional outburst. Those moments had passed. Now only silent tears streamed down her face. Annabel had given in to hysteria when she first discovered the truth. 20 years together, a grown son, and now this betrayal. She had fed him, clothed him, cared for him. What could he have possibly lacked? Annabel could confide only in her closest friend, Harper, who patiently listened to her screams, laments, and unanswered questions. Recognizing the therapeutic release hysteria offered, Harper refrained from trying to calm her friend immediately. However, when the hysteria persisted into its third round, she posed a blunt question. Well, you've identified all the reasons, so what now? The deed is done. It's time to figure out your next steps. Annabel was stunned by such stark realism. She hadn't expected it from Harper. She had anticipated soothing words, comforting hugs, and affirmations that all men were the same. But this cold, direct question hit her like a slap in the face. What should I do next? She redirected the question back. Should she salvage the marriage after infidelity or file for divorce? My God, her thoughts raced. Divorce. A terrifying word. To sever all that had been beautiful between them, and then what? Loneliness as a forsaken wife. No, worse. A deceived divorcee, another dreadful term. And the divorce itself, the division of property, court proceedings, most likely. But what if she forgave him? Just forgave him without conditions or accusations. And then what would stop him from straying again? Annabel's anxiety flared up once more. Living with a perpetually unfaithful husband was unacceptable in her worldview. Harper, Annabel voiced, I don't know what to do. Divorce scares me, but I don't think I can keep forgiving him. Tricky, she decided to follow the advice of television psychologists. On one hand, it meant taking action. On the other, it delayed the final decision. Psychologists suggest, she shared with Harper, hoping for approval and guidance, that you should feed your husband well, shower him with attention and care, and also take care of yourself. Makeup, fitness, all that. Harper regarded her skeptically. You always fed him well, as far as I know, and you've never lacked in showing care. And about yourself, she gestured vaguely, searching for the right words. Not everyone at 25 looks as good as you do at 40. I'm sure his infidelity isn't about any of that. If it is, then your Ethan's a fool. But what if I'm missing something? Annabel hesitated. Harper sighed. Judging by your tone, you want him back, and preferably without any further infidelity. I don't know if you're right. Annabel mused. There you might be. Let's proceed and see what happens. A second handkerchief joined the first, and Annabel clutched a third one tightly in her fist. The standard advice from psychologists hadn't helped. Either her situation was unique, or Harper was right, and Ethan's infidelities had nothing to do with Annabel's appearance or behavior. Things only worsened. Ethan, realizing what had spurred the changes in his wife's behavior, grew even more insolent. He devoured the meals Annabel poured her heart and soul into, accepted her care with the nonchalance of an Oriental sheikh, as if granting her the honor of jumping through hoops for him. Instead of a simple thank you, he gave her a look that seemed to say, leave, don't bother the king. The lingerie which she had blushed and hesitated to buy, he openly mocked. It's just as well, Annabel sighed bitterly, that Miles doesn't see this. Miles. Their only son had started attending medical university last year. To avoid spending an hour and a half commuting, he chose to live in a dormitory. I've decided that adulthood should be embraced fully, not in pieces. If you don't leave childhood behind, it won't leave you, he had wisely said. Now, it was uncertain how Miles would react to the current situation. He might remain silent, or he could intervene and cause a scandal. Regardless of his stance, the issue would not only become evident, but also demand active measures and final resolutions. Annabelle felt unprepared for such a confrontation, both mentally and physically. She gathered the damp handkerchiefs from the armrest and tossed them into the laundry. Uncertain of her next steps, she knew a decision would be inevitable, and the tears began to flow again. The pain of betrayal wasn't just pressing. It was a suffocating resentment. Ethan had stopped hiding his infidelities and began to flaunt them, bragging to friends over the phone about his conquests, without considering that his wife might overhear. At least he hadn't started boasting publicly about these affairs yet. That might come when he finally lost all semblance of conscience. A month had passed since the initial breakdown that Harper had witnessed. Nothing in Annabelle's life had changed, except that she now resembled a shadow more than a person. The constant stress, suffering, and indecision had drained her completely. She felt lost. Life had presented her with a reality she couldn't manage. Harper visited during this time. "Is something wrong?" she asked upon entering the apartment. "From what I see, is everything still the same?" "What do you mean?" Annabelle didn't understand. Reality check, Annabelle. Meet reality. Reality. This is Annabelle. Snap out of it. "I'm fine." Annabelle dismissed her concern. "Wow, how the standards of normality have dropped. With your disheveled hair, tear-streaked face, and dirty robe, you're quite the fashion icon." Harper's gaze shifted to the kitchen table. "What's the surprise?" "What is it?" she asked, pointing to the bottle of wine. "I just opened it." Annabelle admitted, avoiding her eyes. Harper sniffed the contents. "Well, I'll get on with it while you get yourself cleaned up." Annabelle went to the bathroom. When she came out, she was a completely different person. Even in her eyes shone a newfound confidence. Harper, true to her word, was waiting for her in the kitchen. "That," she said, swirling the wine in her glass, "won't solve your problem. It's only going to get worse." "I haven't even started drinking yet," Annabelle replied, sitting down on a stool. "This is the first bottle. Then don't start. We've been through this before, haven't we?" "Where's Ethan?" "He's been missing for 2 days," Annabelle snorted. "Maybe he made the decision for you. It's not the first time he's done this. He comes home, eats, changes clothes, and leaves again." Her lower lip trembled. "Anyway, I came here for a reason. I have a solution." Annabelle looked at her in surprise. "I want you to meet someone," Harper said, ignoring her friend's surprise. "With a man?" asked Annabelle. "Well, yes," Harper replied, puzzled by where Annabelle was heading. "Did you find me a boyfriend?" Annabelle narrowed her eyes. "To take revenge in kind." "They say in kind for payment, not revenge," Harper corrected. "Don't change the subject." The towel wrapped around Annabelle's head slipped to the floor, and her wet hair fell over her shoulders. "Are you suggesting that I cheat on my husband?" Her ponytails twitched nervously. "I never said that," Harper defended herself. "Then what does a man have to do with it?" Annabelle pressed on. "Oh, that's what you mean," Harper hurried to reassure her. "The focus isn't on the fact that he's a man, but on the fact that he's a person. It just so happens he's a man. But he's married, isn't he?" Annabelle questioned, her voice rising in disbelief. "My God, are you suggesting I cheat on my husband with a married man?" Annabelle clutched at her heart. "You're talking like it's all you dream about." Harper tried to calm her. "You don't have to cheat on anyone. Just meet him, tell him Harper sent you, and ask for advice or help. That's all. You don't even have to meet in person." "And what kind of man is this?" Annabelle asked. "You're so fixated on the man part. He's just a good, smart person. Think of him without considering his gender or orientation." "Who is he anyway?" Annabelle inquired. Harper paused to think. "To be honest, He's just a very knowledgeable person, a generalist. I don't know where he works or what exactly he does, but he always has answers to all questions. God knows where he gets them. Maybe he's directly connected to the Universal Data Bank. That's my working hypothesis." "Okay," Annabelle agreed. "Then introduce me. Just remember, I'm not having an affair with him. He's not interested in that, I promise you," Harper assured. Annabelle tucked the piece of paper with the phone number and name into her wallet, despite Harper urging her to save it in her phone immediately. Harper also asked her not to delay the call. "It's like an illness. The later you start treatment, the harder it is to recover," she advised. Annabelle procrastinated, making up excuses and lying to herself. Besides, Ethan had come home and stayed for 5 whole days, leaving only for work. Annabelle guessed the reason for this sudden vacation, but a glimmer of hope remained that her husband had come to his senses and returned to the family. Her hopes were dashed. A phone call at 10 o'clock in the evening stirred Ethan into a frenzy. He rushed around the apartment, grabbing a pair of underwear, socks, his phone, and his wallet, then blurted out, "I have a business trip," before disappearing through the door. Thank you for at least voicing an excuse, Annabelle thought. And he didn't outright say he was going to his mistress. And what kind of business trips does a district doctor from a city clinic have at 10 at night? Annabelle spent a sleepless night, and in the morning, she called the number Harper had given her. "Hello," she said. "I'm calling on behalf of Harper." It was like a scene from a spy novel. "Hello," replied a pleasant baritone. "Harper gave you my number, said I solve problems." "Did she say just that?" He asked with a hint of a smile. "Are you the one?" Annabelle inquired. Usually he replied with a hint of amusement. To avoid any more cloak and dagger theatrics, Annabelle invited Xavier to her home. Harper had sworn he was a decent person, so there was nothing to fear. Xavier arrived punctually, although he had given such a wide time frame for his visit that it was impossible to be late. When he entered, Annabelle tried to form a mental picture of him, but she couldn't get past the physical details. Tall, broad-shouldered, grey-haired. His demeanor was outwardly calm, but there was a peculiar spark in his eyes, as if an element of madness and chaos had entered her home in the guise of a man. His greeting was unusual too, yet it matched the overall impression he gave. "I rarely visit this part of the city. You have such beautiful courtyards, trees and bushes here." Annabelle left this remark unanswered, unsure of how to respond. She led him to the kitchen and placed a large mug of coffee in front of him. Harper had warned her that Xavier consumed coffee by the liter. "Find the biggest cup you have," she advised, "even if it's meant for broth. And don't worry if the coffee gets cold. You once said, coffee is coffee, and its temperature is too variable to matter." While Annabelle was recounting her story, Xavier sipped his coffee, his gaze occasionally drifting to the birch tree outside the window. He nodded now and then, acknowledging certain points, but remained silent, listening without interruption. When Annabelle finished her story and the coffee in the basin was gone, Xavier set the empty cup down and said, "It's not as dire as it seems, but this situation won't resolve itself. Do you want him back, or do you want revenge? You can technically do both, but it wouldn't be quite right, though it might be fair." "I want him back," Annabelle admitted. "I want him to return to me and stop cheating. I can forgive him because I love him, despite all his infidelities and insults. You can call me a fool, but that's just who I am." "Why call you a fool?" Xavier moved closer. "It's perfectly normal to fall in love once and for life. Now we'll solve this problem." Annabelle looked into his eyes, filled with hope and desperation, and saw a sudden twinkle of mischief. A moment ago, his gaze was that of a wise man. Now it had the playful sparkle of a boy. "Can I have another cup of coffee?" he asked, like a child asking for candy. Yes, of course, Annabelle replied, surprised by the abrupt shift. With a fresh cup of coffee, Xavier sat down opposite Annabelle. We'll work on the assumption that most men aren't particularly bright, so you can play on their basic instincts, and if you're willing, use some harsher methods. Actually, Ethan is a doctor, Annabelle clarified. He's quite intelligent. This is not always an indicator, Xavier waved away. I have a friend with 2 higher educations and a PhD degree. He is an excellent specialist in his field, but ask him to cook something other than cereal, and he will be completely at a loss. Well, you know best, Annabelle shrugged. Exactly, he agreed with a satisfied smile. I used to be like that myself. Now, to the point. Should I write this down? Annabelle asked. No need. The most important thing to remember is that you're starting a game. Don't burden yourself with the idea that you're doing this solely to rebuild your family. Understand? Excessive stress will only hinder you. Approach it playfully, and it'll be easier and more interesting. The key is to enjoy the game. Annabelle regretted not recording the conversation, thinking it would have been better on a tape recorder. She took notes but wasn't sure she captured everything. When Xavier left, he gave her a final boost. There are no ugly women, only those who don't realize their beauty and thus don't use it. They live like gray mice, accepting crumbs of attention and affection as happiness. That's fundamentally wrong. Every woman is a queen. She should act and feel like one. Not gratefully accept, but take with dignity. Without a woman providing clean clothes and food, a man will walk dirty and hungry. The era of submissive housewives is over. Now it's up to the woman to shape what a man will be. It's a sin not to use this power. New times, new rules. A woman is a goddess. Behave accordingly. Let men be the maintenance staff if the goddess permits. Beaming with newfound confidence, Annabelle headed to the store. She realized that her family life had depleted her arsenal of makeup. Her lipsticks, nail polishes, eyeshadows, and blushes were all in delicate tones that barely made an impact. She needed bold makeup for the game. Her wardrobe also needed an overhaul. Modest and puritanical outfits were pushed aside in favor of shorter, tighter, and more sparkling attire. Well, Annabelle said to her reflection in the mirror, let's play. Annabelle returned home 3 hours later than usual. Strangely, Ethan was at home. He wanted to scold her for being late and for not having dinner ready, but he was struck speechless by her appearance. The 3 hours Annabelle spent were dedicated to perfecting her makeup, styling, and achieving an audacious look hidden under a cloak. Where have you been? Ethan asked, trying to maintain control. Annabelle stopped him with a single phrase and a dismissive look that said he was as unappealing as rotten vegetables. If Ethan had plans to go out that evening, they evaporated. He was left with many questions, but the main one was, what happened to my wife? The weekend was on the horizon, and Ethan had already mapped out his free time. But as he pictured his plans alongside his wife, things felt off. You see, they had been through a lot together, and now here it was. The question lingered. Why all this drama? Poor Ethan had no clue. This was just the tip of the iceberg. By morning, Annabelle's phone was blowing up every 10 minutes. She would pointedly ignore some calls, tell others she couldn't talk, and occasionally retreat to the bathroom, chatting away under the guise of running water. Ethan was a bundle of nerves. He felt like those calls were meant for him, but he couldn't bring himself to confront her directly. How could he? A man of his stature stooping to such questions? Never. But this was part of the game. Annabelle had the foresight to set 30 alarms on her phone with an interval of 5 to 15 minutes. Every time he called, she either pretended to be talking or hung up. It was all part of the plan. She spent 2 hours compiling a list of fictitious contacts. The contact list was overflowing with male names, and each number had been called several times in the last 24 hours. And when does she find the time for all this? Ethan was surprised, not suspecting that it was all a setup. By evening, Annabelle was decked out in bright makeup and her most elegant dress. With a simple, "I'm going for a walk," she slipped out the door. She had arranged to stay at Harper's, but Ethan didn't need to know that. Let him stew and ruminate, she thought. Give him a reason to be jealous. His possessiveness would choke him more effectively than any toad. To him, this was a direct assault on his property. He wouldn't be able to swallow it. He'd draw some conclusions for sure. If he realized he was getting a taste of his own medicine and stopped his antics, they could move towards forgiveness. But if he didn't get it, or worse, sought revenge, it was game on. Is there any way to speed up his decision? Annabelle asked during a lecture. Of course, Xavier nodded. The predatory aura of men's cologne. What a move! Annabelle had doused herself in it. She staggered in, threw her coat and bag on the floor, and wobbled into the room, undressing on autopilot. Ethan, picking up her coat, noticed a suspicious bulge in the pocket. His inner detective, despite a restless night, was still alert. He investigated and found a pair of women's panties. Holding them at arm's length, he glanced between the underwear and his tottering wife. His mind raced. She's. But such thoughts were hard to process. Of course not. It was a plant, a deliberate ploy for her overly inquisitive husband. The final act, so to speak. Ethan sank to the floor, overwhelmed. The evidence seemed irrefutable. His wife was cheating. His own wife. An intelligent man might rethink his behavior, attempt to fix things. But as Xavier had guessed, Ethan was not that man. Shaking off the shock, right there in the hallway, he called some woman named Sadie and stormed out to exact his revenge. He had it coming, Annabelle muttered, no longer feigning sleep. He had a chance to fix things, but chose retaliation instead. A scorned woman knows no bounds. She'll endure and wait, striking when her enemy least expects it. Annabelle dialed back her intensity. She wore less garish makeup, opting for subtle elegance. She didn't dress like a femme fatale, but her style was always on point. Even the alarm games were reduced to a couple of times a day. To lull Ethan into a false sense of security, she resumed her usual household chores. Annabelle figured a week was enough to set the stage for her next move. Then she'd launch her ruthless plan. The effectiveness of Annabelle's revenge was confirmed when she overheard Ethan's phone conversation without the slightest feeling of guilt. "Aiden, you have to help me, man." "Hayden, do you know Annabelle?" Annabelle smiled rapaciously and continued to listen. "Aiden, something's wrong. You know, the equipment doesn't work the way it should. It only works when I'm with my wife." There was a long silence before Ethan exploded. What kind of divine punishment is this? It's not funny or scientific. And don't even start talking about universal justice. Annabelle admired this silly advice. "This is where we are," she mused. When Harper asked how Annabelle was re-educating her husband, Annabelle explained that she had been sticking to work, avoiding even her friends. "And how's he reacting to your transformation?" Harper inquired. "You wouldn't believe it," Annabelle said. "He tries to care for me, brings me coffee, covers me with a blanket, feeds me sweets. Yesterday, he even gave me a bouquet of roses. Did he apologize?" There was no need. Somehow, Harper, he knows that I know everything. He feels guilty and tries to atone for it. "And you?" I asked. Harper asked. Annabelle thought about it. "Well, did you forgive him or not? Will you stay together or kick him out?" "I do not know," Annabelle replied quietly. "After talking to Xavier, I rethought everything myself, Ethan, our marriage. Xavier was right. A woman is a queen and should behave like a queen. If she wants to, she will forgive. If not, she will execute. Only she decides when and how. So I really don't know what's going to happen next. Life will show." Annabelle pondered these thoughts. What will happen next? Can I forgive Ethan and live with him, knowing he cheated? Or shall I start a new life without him? She felt that the answers would come naturally. A few weeks passed. Ethan did everything he could to earn Annabelle's forgiveness. He became more attentive, caring, spent more time at home, helped with chores, and showed his devotion in every possible way. Annabelle saw his efforts, but the internal conflict left her restless. She knew something had changed forever, and it wouldn't be easy to restore everything. One evening, sitting in the kitchen, Annabelle thought again about her conversation with Xavier. His advice seemed fruitful, but doubts lingered. Maybe I should meet him again, she thought. The decision came naturally. Annabelle dialed Xavier's number and set up a meeting. When Xavier arrived, Annabelle felt an immediate sense of relief. He was someone she could talk to openly, without fear of judgment. Xavier, I realize a lot has changed, and I'm not sure I can stay with Ethan. What do you recommend? She asked. Xavier looked at her with warmth and understanding. Annabelle, your happiness is the most important thing. No one can tell you what to do except yourself. You need to feel ready for whatever decision you make. If you think you can forgive and move on, try it. If not, don't be afraid to start anew. You're a strong woman and can handle any challenge. These words were a revelation for Annabelle. She realized she shouldn't fear the future, whatever it might hold. Thank you, Xavier. You always know what to say, she said with a smile. Annabelle spent the next few days reflecting. She gradually understood that her happiness was crucial and shouldn't be sacrificed. One evening, she decided to talk to Ethan. Ethan, we need to talk, she said as they sat at the table. I've thought long and hard about our future and realized I can't live with you, knowing you cheated. I don't want to torture you or myself. It's better if we separate. Ethan was stunned. He hadn't expected this outcome, but deep down, he knew he was to blame. Annabelle, I understand. I'm very sorry it turned out this way. I hope to fix it, but it's probably too late. Annabelle felt a wave of relief. She had finally made the right decision for both of them. Thank you for understanding, Ethan. This is best for both of us. We can start new lives and find our happiness. Months passed. Annabelle began a new life filled with self-realization, new connections, and true happiness. She knew breaking up with Ethan was the right decision and felt free and content. Ethan also found his path, realizing his mistakes and striving not to repeat them. Annabelle continued to stay in touch with Xavier, who became a good friend and mentor. His advice helped her navigate difficult situations and embrace the unknown. Life gradually improved, and Annabelle realized that believing in oneself and embracing change were the keys to true happiness.